Welcome everyone to TAMIDS Spring 2021 Seminar Tutorial Series. And today is a special event. It's our Spring 2021 Tripods Distinguished Seminar. And I would like to first acknowledge our co-sponsor, the TMU Tripods Institute, and its director, Dr. Bonnie Malik. So thank you, Bonnie, for setting up the distinguished seminar. And indeed, we have a very distinguished speaker today, Dr. Christos Papadimitriou, the Donovan Family Professor of Computer Science at the Columbia University. Christos is a member of both National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Engineering. He received numerous highly prestigious awards, and which I will not enumerate here. Had I done that, I don't think we're going to leave too much time for him to speak. Christos is a theoretical computer scientist with his work impacting on lots of applications. He made a fundamental contribution on algorithms and complexity. He authored the textbook of Computational Complexity, one of the most widely used textbook in the field. Also co-authored the textbook Algorithms. But the work of Christos, I knew the best is actually this book, Large Comics. My daughter recommended this book to me, and I have read that twice. I'm very delighted, actually, at least for this book, this work of Christos, I was able to understand from back to back. Okay, both my daughter and I utterly enjoyed reading it. I highly recommend to all the audience to take a chance to take a look at the book. But I don't think Christos is going to talk about large comics today. I think he's going to talk to us about the language, computation, and brain. And Christos, it's a great honor to have you here today. The platform is yours, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your kind words. Hello, everybody. I just said that I have two students in my class who are now in Texas, and you know that we are all on your side in this calamity. We wish you the best. Stay safe. I'll try to entertain you a little this way. I am going to. Oh, by the way, of course, congratulations for the Tripods grant. It's a great honor. I will talk about something that we are all familiar with. The amazing thing that is happening right now, which is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, think about it. What happens is that I create airwaves in my space, and these airwaves are reproduced through another miracle that I'm not going to get into your space. And these airwaves are translated through your tympanum and cochlea into words. These words and your auditory cortex, these words mobilize some neurons in this area of the brain that's on your screen right now. In the beginning, the purple area on the lower right, then the green area, eventually the orange area, and then the amazing miracle happens that these words are translated into hierarchies and meaning, this is an amazing mystery which we only now start to understand. And I mean, the reason that we started to understand, and really the reason that I'm interested in it, is because some very pioneering experimenters have done some very important, very interesting experiments. So let me tell you one experiment. This happened at NYU 5 years ago. They showed, they presented a tape with words like this. That was done in 6 different languages. In all 6 languages, it was single syllable words pronounced at 4 hertz, 4 words every second. like Fred, sheep, hill, give, true, melt, fans, blue, guess, hits, then cuts. And it went on for 5 minutes. And these people were listening, and they were recording from their brain, many hundreds of patients. And in the end, they took the signal, they mixed it, they took the Fourier transform, and guess what happened? Okay, that's the control. Of course, there was a peak at 4 hertz because 4 times every second, the brain of the subjects had to search and decode a word. And then they did something which was very clever. They repeated the same thing, except that every 4 words, they made sense. Okay, they were a sentence. Okay, and guess what happened? Now there were 4 peaks, 3 peaks, 1, 2, and 4. And I mean, if you think about 4, we know that again you have to look for a word. But what is 1? 1 means that once every second, the listener had to construct a sentence, and twice every second had to construct a phrase: bad cats eat fish. I believe that what happened was this. Okay, that I mean, linguists have been telling us for ages that we have trees in our brain, but I don't think I've been convinced so much as by this experiment. Okay, that something has happened. Okay, that something mechanical and very profound is happening in your brain when you listen to such such simple, even such simple sentences. So here's a question: how are these representations created in the brain? And they have to be created in about a dozen spikes, neuronal spikes per step. Why a dozen? Because neuron spikes in this part of the brain go usually at 50 megahertz, 50 hertz or 60 hertz, and language is about 4 hertz. Okay, 4 syllables per that's universally true. 4 syllables per second. Okay, here's another experiment that they read to subjects sentences like the ball hit the track and the track hit the ball, pairs like that. And different areas of the superior temporal gyrus, which is the green area that I showed you, responded to track in the 2 sentences. So this means that the object and the subject of the sentence are treated differently, and they are recorded in a different place. And in fact, the first area also responded when you use a passive voice to say the same thing as the ball hit the track. The track was hit by the ball. Okay. The brain said, no, that's no, it looks subject, but it's not subject, it's an object. Here's another one. They found in another experiment around the same time that the completion of phrases and especially of sentences activates parts of Broca's area. So these are Broca's area. Broca's area is the area, the orange area that I showed you before. This is Broca's area, Wernicke's area, that's called the language organ. We all have it on our left hemisphere if you are right-handed. If you are left-handed, usually we have it on the right hemisphere. We know now that there are these 3 areas. The lexicon, this is the purple area is called the medial temporal lobe, and all words, pretty much everything we know. So, is everything we have seen and felt and happened to us and we know is initially stored there. The hippocampus is there. But certainly words, we know for sure that the processing of a sentence starts with the word lookup in the lexicon. Then there is activity Wernicke's area, the red area. And then there is activity in Broca's area. And we also know that there are these arrows, these fibers, and there are amazing fibers that connect also the adjacent green and blue areas, fibers of synapses, of connections between neurons. These fibers didn't exist in the chimpanzee or were very weak in the chimpanzee. And in fact, one of these fibers, which is the blue fiber, okay, that connects Wernicke's area with Broca's area, and it's called the arcuate fasciculus, is to double the size on our left brain that is in the right brain. And this is the only asymmetry that exists in mammals, okay, so in the brain of mammals. So this is amazing stuff, okay. For us to develop language, a lot of stuff had to happen. All right. So now let's forget about language. Let's go 10 miles high. I believe this is the most important question in science. I mean, the most challenging, the most meaningful. I mean, so I believe if we understand this, it's impossible to understand this without developing new amazing scientific and technological apparatus, and two, coming closer to understanding ourselves. Okay, so so this is an incredible question. All right, I mean, but mind the gap. Okay, this is on the upper left. You have a very famous book on cognitive neuroscience. On the lower right, you have experimental neuroscience. There is a huge gap, both in scale, in style, in methodology, in mindset. Okay, so and in fact, this is Richard Axel, who won the Nobel Prize 15 years ago for his work on olfaction, smell. He put it very well 2 years ago. We do not have a logic for the transformation of neural activity into thought. I view discerning this logic as the most important future direction of neuroscience. Okay, so when I heard this, okay, I felt like I was blessed by the Pope. Okay, you know that because Richard Axel is my hero and colleague actually at Columbia in this field. And the question is, what kind of formal theory do we need? Okay, I mean, I have a proposal. You know, what I'm proposing here is an answer. Let's look at it in a different way. Is there computation in the brain? I propose that we say, yes, there is computation in the brain. You know why? Because if there is no computation in the brain, I will never understand how the brain works. Okay, so I have to assume that there is computation in the brain. And the question is, what is the right level? And people argue that molecules compute, and I believe them. And of course, we all know that spiky neurons and synapses compute, and they can do wonderful computations. And there are people more and more convincingly that say that the dendrites, the input device of the neurons, is where the real computation happens. And of course, you have cognitive scientists who make an experiment and they record with fMRI patients. And then they say, aha, you see the subject reacted as if his brain or her brain was executing the following program, okay? They write a short program. So there is computation happening at all these levels, but there is an incredibly huge gap, and that's the gap that Axel was talking about, okay? And I have a proposal. I believe that the right level in between whole brain and spiky neurons is the assemblies of neurons, okay? So assemblies is not something that I discovered or invented, okay? So, you know, it's something that we have known exists for 70 years now, but it's only now that we're putting our hands on them, okay? So in the 80s, we used to call them the grandmother cell. There was this myth that we all have a grandmother cell, and every time we think of a neuron, and every time we think of our grandmother, this neuron fires. But now we know much more, okay? That it could not be that there is one grandmother cell, okay? If there is one grandmother cell, then there is no grandmother, okay? Because one cell, one neuron cannot do anything. You need thousands of neurons to have any effect, okay? Now, since the 90s, we call it the Jennifer Aniston cells, plural, because they did experiments. They showed to patients 100 famous people, and they recorded from a few neurons, and they said, and one of them consistently reacted to Jennifer Aniston. So they called this the Jennifer Aniston neuron, but then they realized by back of the envelope calculation, they could not be so lucky. Choose 100 neurons out of millions, show 100 pictures, and chance upon a cell, okay? That represents one of the pictures. So it must be that Jennifer Aniston is perhaps 50,000 cells, okay? 50,000 neurons that they all react to the image or name or voice of Jennifer Aniston. So here's the short history. 72 years ago, Donald Hebb, sort of, the founder of cognitive neuroscience, described assemblies in his book. So, he was convinced that assemblies exist. He's the one who brought us also Hebbian plasticity. Neuroscientists have been seeking assemblies in the next half century, but only in 2003 they were able to definitely nail them. Okay, so yes, they caught them on the act. They saw assemblies in action, and sort of the great neuroscientist who discovered them, Busacki, wrote recently that assemblies are the alphabet of the neuron, of the brain. So basically, there is a consensus now in neuroscience that the assemblies are important. But what I'm proposing is a way for the assemblies to be the missing computational level between neurons and the whole brain. What is an assembly? It's a large and densely interconnected set of excitatory neurons. You see, in the brain area, whose firing in a pattern is tantamount to our thinking of a particular memory, concept, idea, person, name, word, episode, etc. So even the first words are a little strange. How can it be a large and densely interconnected center of neurons? By this I mean that the brain is like a sparse graph, huge sparse graph. And I'm telling you that, an assembly is a set of these neurons that have, let's say, 10 times more interconnections than average. Okay, so if you think about it, that's a difficult CS problem. Okay, how do you do this? It's impossible. Okay, but the brain does it. Okay, and I'll show you how. And this set of neurons, very stable, densely interconnected set of neurons, they represent an idea. Okay, rather stably. Okay, so things migrate, but they migrate slowly. Okay. And in a recent paper, we published it in PNAS a few months back, we articulate what I call the assembly hypothesis, which basically says that there is an intermediate level of brain computation, called the assembly calculus. It is implicated in higher cognitive functions. So this is, I'm sure that similar things happened in other mammals, but I am targeting humans. Okay, so I'm more interested in what happens to humans because I believe that this is a much richer application area for the assembly calculus. So higher cognitive functions like reasoning, planning, language, storytelling, autobiography, mathematics, science, music, this kind of stuff. Assemblies of neurons are its basic data type. Okay, that basically it's a programming language, which we had at least the good taste not call the assembly language. Okay, so but its basic data type is the assembly. What are the operations? Projection. I'm going to explain to show you how the operations work. Association, merge, bind, or reciprocal. Bind is a kind of projection, and we have control commands: read, fire, inhibit, disinhibit. Read reads a brain area and tells you which assembly fired. So this creates a language in which you can write interesting programs. Okay, and I'm going to show you one such program later. Okay, so these are the operations, and I'm going to explain to you projection. So imagine the following: you have a brain area, the stuff on the left, and in it there is an assembly already. And I'm going to show you how this assembly can construct another assembly. Okay, and you assume that there is a lot of synapses going from left to right here. In other words, that this wall is crossed by a lot of synapses going from left to right. All right. So when this assembly on the left fires, there's going to be a lot of synaptic input going to the right, and as a result, this is going to select a few neurons that will fire, okay? But these are just random neurons, okay? So they're not special in any way. They're not densely connected or anything. But now something very interesting happens. Both of these assemblies fire, okay? Both of these sets of neurons fire, and now there is still synaptic connectivity, a lot of synaptic input going from left to right, and now it's bigger. Why? Because of Hebbian plasticity. Because these synapses have fire, now they are a little more strong. So there is stronger synaptic current going down from left to right, but also there is recurrent synaptic plasticity, synaptic current from the firing cells in the blue circle to the rest of the right area. And so a new circle will be formed, a new set of neurons, and then these will fire and a new will be formed and so on, okay? So the questions are, does this process converge? Is the result densely connected? Does it converge after a dozen or so steps? Another thing that happens is that from now on, the stable assembly on the left, and I'm going to convince you that it's stable, will fire every time the assembly on the right fires again. Okay, so that's okay. And all of this requires a math model. So I'm going to present a math model for you. It's the model that we use. And you assume that there is a finite number of brain regions. Each of them contains n neurons. Think of n as many millions. Inhibition, because brain areas are made so that not all of the neurons can fire, because there is inhibition, only k of these fires, think of k as something like the square root of n. Very few of them fire. That's selection. Some pairs of areas are connected by these red arrows, by random, in other words, two random neurons in this area and that area have some probability p of being connected by a synapse, by a directed edge, and all of them are recurrently connected. So there is a GMP, a random graph formed in all of these areas. Neurons fire in discrete steps. Okay, this is an assumption that is very convenient, but also false. Okay, so I'm going to talk about it. And how do they fire? I mean, we know that neurons fire synchronously, but it's very, very convenient to think of them as firing synchronously, and it does not change much. So the K with the highest input are selected to fire. Okay, and this is an important operation. We call it random project and cap. Okay, RPNC, and it's an important operation for the brain. I think that that's what the brain does. It's important operation for AI, I believe. Okay, for example, if you take a deep net, and instead of ReLU at every layer, you do this. You select let's say the square root of n of the neurons that had the most synaptic input to fire, and other than that you do SGD like before. It turns out that the deep net works, and works better in the sense that that adversarial network adversarial attacks cannot hurt it. Okay, so it's much more robust. So that's an important primitive. Okay, and as I told you, it models the inhibitory excitatory equilibrium. Also, in the red arrows can be on and off, can be inhibited and disinhibited. And plasticity, if I is connected through synapse with J, I fires, in the next step J fires, the weight of the synapse IJ is increased by 10%, let's say. Okay, and there are many other details of the model that I'm not telling you about. But the point is that you can assume that every area has, I don't know, 10, 50 million neurons. K at any time, let's say 10,000 of them fire. The probability of connectivity is, let's say, 0.1%. and the plasticity increases by 10%. All right? And the main ideas of this model are randomness, selection, and plasticity. If you think about it, these are the great forces of life. Okay, so and the basic operation is random projection and cap. So, is this model realistic? Okay, here's what I think: discrete time steps are unrealistic, but not distortive. That don't change much. And how do we know? Because we do the same thing with asynchronous models of neurorealistic neural models, and we get very similar behaviors. The random projection and cap operation is stylized, but in a very natural way and in a very convenient mathematical way, captures the excitatory inhibitory balance, which would take differential equations and the like to put in the model otherwise. Assemblies and plasticity. So, to tell you the truth, when I present these models to neuroscientists, it's not like they scream at me. So, they sort of, they see the point. But some of them tell me, I believe assemblies are there and plasticity is there, but I was thinking them of more long term, not at 4 Hz. Okay, so maybe minutes. Okay, but it's not. It's just a perception. Okay, they have not been used to thinking of them as something that is extremely dynamic, not because cannot be. So all said, I believe that this is a quite realistic model of the brain. Okay, so actually we have implemented this model, and you can find it. I mean, you can find it. There are many links, in fact, from our PNAS paper, and you can play with it. To start, you have to write the command load brain, which is a good, nice thing to do, especially if it's the first thing you do in the morning. Okay, that's okay. Look at this picture. Okay, these are all our cousins. Okay, so the mammals, and here is us. Okay, you see what's the difference? The difference is, in the beginning there was almost no white stuff. White stuff is everything in our brain except for the senses and the motion. Okay, but you see, in the beginning, mice, squirrels, bats, and so on. So they have very white stuff, but we have tons of white stuff. More than 95% of our cortex is white stuff. Okay, and the chimpanzee had a lot of white stuff, but we have 3 times more. Okay, so the point is that that humans have these non-sensory real estate in their brain. Okay, and obviously this is what made the difference. Okay, so so we have to study that, and this is the intended application of the assembly calculus. Okay, so I told you about the association cortex. Let me tell you about the association operation of 2 assemblies. Okay, think of the following thing, right? I mean, that you have 2 stimuli. I mean, by stimuli, I mean that there are 2 assemblies, and they are more directly connected to the outside world. Okay, so maybe they represent 2 people and they have copied through projection themselves to another area. And now imagine that these assemblies fire together, synchronously. Okay, what will happen? The assemblies on the left, on the right, will also fire, but that's not the beginning of it. Something much more dramatic is going to happen. That by firing slowly, they are going to come closer, in the sense that they are going to exchange neurons and end up overlapping considerably, maybe something between 10 and 20%. Okay, and the reason for that is that their parent assemblies co-occurred. Okay, so it turns out that assemblies can overlap if the corresponding concepts they represent have connections, okay? And this is, and in fact, I mean, I'll tell you an amazing experiment that actually showed this about 5 years ago. They recorded from one neuron in one patient. Actually, they had dozens of pages and hundreds of neurons, but let's focus on one neuron and one patient. And this was the Eiffel Tower neuron. Every time they showed the Eiffel Tower, the thing would fire, okay? They showed other famous places, nothing. They showed famous people, nothing. And then they did something really clever. They photoshopped Obama in front of the Eiffel Tower. And dutifully, the neuron, it's the Eiffel Tower neuron, saw the Eiffel Tower and fired. Then they show the Eiffel Tower, it fires always. I mean, nothing changed. They show other places, doesn't fire. They show now Obama, what do you think happens? Remember, the first time it didn't fire. Now it fires. Is this amazing? This poor guy learned that Obama has been to the Eiffel Tower. And this neuron, the neuron that these experimenters have been recording from, happened to be the neuron, one of the maybe 10,000 neurons that jumped from the Eiffel Tower assembly to the Obama assembly. And now, from now on, will fire every time Obama fires, okay? To memorize the fact that Obama has been to the Eiffel Tower. So this is, and I mean, our brain is like that, okay? So, you know, assemblies are random sets, so they can overlap randomly. But I mean, because of the numbers, they can overlap randomly at 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 at most. But I mean, when they overlap in tens of thousands of common neurons, this encodes affinities like co-occurrence, statistical similarity, shared attributes, and so on. Okay, so that's so you have a web of association in your brain, and also if you have two assemblies in an area and overlap, and then they are projected to another area, we have proved that overlap is preserved quite well. Okay, so this means that this association is a very useful operation for brains. And for example, they may enable associative recall. Okay, so you know, I tell you, a computer scientist teaches in California. You know, if you know, male, tall, and so on, and then suddenly something, you know, somebody you know, you remember somebody you know. So. And possibly other more sophisticated modes of randomized computation. Okay, so that's something that we are exploring only now. But what I want to show you is that assembly operations are real. By this I mean the following: that they correspond to behaviors of assemblies that have been observed in experiments, like the ones I showed you before, or are strongly suggested by experiments. Okay, like the merge operation I'm going to tell you next, and they can be provably compiled down to, so they are real in the following two senses. First of all, they are not figments of my imagination or science fiction. We've seen them happen in experiments. And second, we know that they are real because we can compile them down to the activity of neurons and synapses. And we can do this through mathematical proofs and simulations in our model, or the simulations in more neurorealistic spiky neurons. So for all these reasons, I believe that there is something in the assembly calculus. So here it is. These are the operations. You can write interesting programs using them. The question: how powerful is the system? And the answer is it's Turing complete. In the following sense, that it can be performed under some conditions, or some hypotheses, some assumptions, arbitrary square root of n space computations. Okay, square root of n space, where n is more than 1 million, means 1,000 parallel steps, and 1,000 parallel steps, 100 parallel steps is probably can do anything that brains can do. Okay, so this is a very powerful system. Okay, merge. Okay, you have there's a question.
Can I ask you a quick question here?
Yeah.
On the previous slides, and So these operations, when I talk about existing brain, are you talking about specific human brain, or this could be even for other non-human mammals' brain?
Yeah. So it can be for human brain. It can be for it's a mathematical model, first of all, right? It models brains. It models cortex. The association cortex of mammals. It is intended. Its numbers, its power, is meant to represent what humans can do. Many of these operations, perhaps all of these operations, happen in the brain of dogs and cats, okay, also, but possibly all of them. But the point is, and I'm going to show you in about 10 minutes, you'll see that it's the human brain that can do them at industrial strength.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll see what I mean, I think, in 10 minutes.
Okay.
So that's merge of assemblies. Merge is sort of the most complicated operation that we have in the assembly calculus. Basically, you have to synchronize 5 areas. The assemblies on the left fire. As a result, the assemblies in the middle fire. They continue firing, and eventually, after 10 or 20 operations, such firings, a new assembly emerges in the right area, which has 2 back and forth strong connectivities with the 2 middle assemblies. And this is how you can build hierarchies, okay, trees. All right, so this is, and as you can imagine, this is important for language. And in fact, I told you about the very strong fibers that we have in our left brain. And this is an image of the strongest of all. It's called the arcuate fasciculus. And you wonder, does it, is it because of this that you can do merges, at industrial strength in the human brain? Okay. Why study language? Okay. My neuroscientist friends sometimes ask me, why do you study language? Language is the hardest thing that any brain has ever done. Why don't you wait until you understand brains, and then we'll just sit back and think about language? And, I tell them that this is a huge opportunity, has a huge opportunity cost, because language is a huge opportunity. Okay, language came about 3,000 generations ago. Can you believe it? That 3,000 generations, your ancestors could not speak. Okay, they had no language, but that was about 1% of the road from the chimpanzee. So our brain had already developed almost 99%. Okay, it was almost there. And language evolved to exploit the brain strength. Okay, so language itself evolved after the brain. So it's an incredible mirror of the brain. And this is why we have to study. And of course, there are all these great experiments that I presented to you. Okay, so here is how language could work using the assembly calculus, all right? But that's only so you know. And the way it could work is this: what is the most? If you ask yourself, what is language? Okay, it's very difficult to define, all right? So because language is you cannot easily separate it from the rest of you. But you can say that the most elementary operation of language, okay, the most elementary particle of language is looking at or imagining something and putting it in our brain, sort of setting it up as a sentence, okay? So you look at this picture and you try to set it up as a sentence, okay? What do? you look for the right verb in your lexicon, okay? And eventually you find it. You look for the right, yeah, you project it to the Wernicke's area. You look for the subject, you look for the object. And maybe all of this happened in parallel, okay? There's no reason why they cannot happen in parallel. And then you create the verb phrase, kickball, and then you create the sentence, boy kicks ball. And of course, then you have to do many things like say it, okay? For this, you have to go down the tree and put it in the right order. In English, it's subject, verb, object. In Arabic is subject, verb, subject, object, and so on. I mean, so so these operations, and this is part of our paper that we published half a year ago. These can be done by the assembly calculus. Okay, so but I mean, I know what everybody's asking. How about comprehension? Okay, generation. Who cares? I mean, so it's perhaps more basic, but I mean, generation is comprehension is a problem. Something that comprehension came much later than generation. So in other words, that we could talk to ourselves and create thoughts for 1 million years, but only for 80,000 years we'll be able to speak. But I mean, so it could be that maybe it's a reverse engineer of generation. I mean, there is a lot of opinions among students of language in this. Online parsing seems much more complicated than generation. It must solve problems like the ambiguity in language, the fact that a word can have many meanings, that maybe your first attempt will fail and you have to do backtracking. There is recursion. There is grammaticality, which basically, when you hear a sentence, you may say, "Wait a minute, that was not correct." Okay, so and maybe the mistake was very subtle. Okay, so that you can't even explain it to yourself. It's not like there is missing verb or something. I mean, it's something much more refined. Okay, so. Here is what I'm announcing. We have written a parser for English in the assembly calculus. Okay, so that's I have not made many experiments in my life, so I'm a theoretician. But this is for me an incredibly. I mean, I'm extremely excited about this experiment. Okay, so basically, we. My co-workers were NLP people. Okay, so Mike Collins and Dan Mitropolsky. So we had to start with what we know. In some sense, writing this parser, we were constrained by what people knew about the language. Okay, so about how language happens in the brain. All the experiments I told you. And 200 more that I have not told you. Okay, so so we had to take everything into account. So we assume that there are brain areas and fibers that hold words and project to each other, and they could do things like that. And individually, they can be inhibited, disinhibited. So basically, language focuses on some areas and some fibers at every moment. There is the lex area, the lexicon, that contains assemblies for words, okay? And there are two rival architectures in the literature, so, and we chose one and implemented it, okay? The one that was closer to what we thought seemed correct. And here is the architecture that you have on the left, lexicon, and if you wish, these areas correspond to these areas in the picture of the brain. This is the lexicon and contains words. Okay, and these are various areas of Wernicke's area, and there are fibers that connect all of them to one another. Okay, these are fibers of synapses. And they can be, these areas of synapses can be individually inhibited and disinhibited. Okay, so The lex area contains an assembly for each word. Okay, so here I have 4 words. Your lex probably contains 10,000, 20,000 words. Okay, and can be inhibited. Okay, right? And now comes the important stuff. We assume that each one of these assemblies in each one of these words, assembly words, word assemblies in lex is equipped with triggers that inhibit, disinhibit fibers and areas. What I'm saying is that among the many tens of thousands of neurons in each one of these words, of these assemblies, there are some neurons whose job is to inhibit and disinhibit fibers. Okay, so every fiber has some triggers that inhibit it, disinhibit it, and these triggers are parts of the assemblies. Okay, of the assemblies that use these inhibitions and disinhibitions. So this action set, so it's a set, small set, maybe 2 or 3 commands, disinhibit this, inhibit this, disinhibit this. But these commands encode the word's part of speech. Is it a verb? Is it a transitive verb? Is it a noun? Okay? Is it an adverb? Is it an adjective, an article, and so on? When the word assembly fires, its action set is executed. Okay? And if you think about it, if you take all the action sets of all the words, that's something like the grammar of the language. Okay? This is the grammar. This is how the language works. Okay? It's okay. The parser is written in an extension, in a slight extension of the assembly calculus. What we have is we add actions to assemblies. In other words, we assume that the set of neurons that constitute an assembly may contain the particular triggers that correspond to the action set of this particular part of speech to which this word belongs. And we have a slight generalization of merge. It's a considerable generalization of merge, which we call project star. Here is what I want to impress on you, okay, to make sure we're on the same page. That this parser, we implemented it exclusively through the spikes of neurons. Okay? We didn't write commands in a language, okay? We wrote commands in a language that is translated into the spiking of neurons. Only, nothing else. And taking into account what we know about the way we believe language is implemented in the brain. After processing a sentence, the parser leaves behind a retrievable trail of side effects, which is, we call the parse. So you can have a readout mechanism that goes and basically tells you that's the parse. The parse, for those of you who are doing NLP, is roughly a dependency tree. The prototype is running and we submitted the paper, okay? And my co-authors are Mike Collins and Dan Mitropolsky. So, I mean, I hope that, that I convey to you how delighted and excited I am with this project, okay? So, with this. So what does it do? It parses simple sentences such as this one. The young couple in the next house saw the old little white car of the main suspect quite clearly. Okay, so it will go ahead and parse it, and it will leave behind a trail that if you go and read it, say, okay, that was the parse, the parse of that's what the syntactic structure of this sentence. Okay, and speed is about 20 to 25 spikes per word. Okay, which is between 0.3 and 0.5 seconds per word, which is roughly the way I speak now and the way you understand my talk now. Okay. More features can be added easily. For example, if the sentence was the young couple living in the next house, if there was the word living there, which doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, our parser would be confused. Okay, so, but this is trivial. So, we just add, it's because we didn't have the time to add the required other brain areas that handle phenomena like that. In all, we are going to use between 15 and 20 brain areas. Okay, so to in Wernicke's area to encode all of English. And more features can be added quite easily. With much more work, what would take a lot more work is recursion and sentence embedding. You see here the old little white car. That's recursion. Okay, it's basically the English language tells you that a noun can be preceded by 0 or more adjectives. Okay, actually there are rules that tell you which order these adjectives would be. Okay, white old little car would be bad English. Okay, but our parser is not able to recognize that, but is able to recognize that old little white car is basically 3 adjectives that all characterize car. Okay, but so this kind of recursion we have it, but there is a more the young couple in the next house which you met yesterday. Okay, this would completely crash our compiler. Okay, so the old and so so an embedded sentence would kill it, because an embedded sentence needs true recursion, needs recursion in the computer science sense with activation, record, and stack, and we think we know how to do it, but we have not done it. Okay, and it will take some time to do it. Another important part that we are missing is polysemy. Okay, so I told you that the action set of every word of every assembly is its syntactic role. Okay, what does it mean? Is it noun? Is it transitive verb? Is it intransitive verb? But the word rock in English is all 3. It's a noun. It's an intransitive verb. Okay, rocking chair, and it's a transitive verb, rock the boat. Okay, so it means that the assembly rock should really have 3 action sets, a distribution on action sets. And there is a decision problem. Which one do you see rock in a sentence? Which one do you use of the 3? And basically, that's polysemy. Okay, that's the problem of polysemy and ambiguity. And we have in mind a solution that basically what we are going to do, we are going to do essentially what transformers do. Okay, we are going to pay attention around us. Okay, so every word is going to pay attention around it. There is going to be some look ahead, some look behind, and there is going to be some kind of classifier that tells you if the words 2 words before the 2 words behind are like this. An adjective, a verb, a noun, and the preposition, then probably the first one is the right one. Okay, so and so on. Okay, so we need to train a classifier. Okay, how is it trained? It's trained on previous unsuccessful attempts. Good. So also, okay, we implemented a simple Russian parser. Okay, so Russian is a completely different language than English in the sense that it has no word order, all possible, so and therefore the action sets have to be completely different, and it was just an amusing exercise, but it made the main point. It made an important point by doing it. Okay, that you see. Both English babies and Russian babies learn, English babies learn English and Russian babies learn Russian. So this means that English babies develop in the hardware they have, which is exactly the same hardware that Russian babies have. develop the English parser, and the Russian babies develop our Russian parser, who is completely different. Okay, how is this done? All right, this is in many ways the most basic question in linguistics you can ask. Okay, how is language? How do babies learn different languages? And my point is not that we answered it. Okay, my point is that we were forced to ask it. Okay, what I'm saying is that this stupid experiment brought us very, very close to the reality of language. Okay, when you work on language in the brain, basically all the time you have the feeling that you are not fighting the beast, that you are fighting the shadow of the beast, the allusion to the beast, the avatar of the beast. Okay, so here we think that we are engaging we are being defeated by the real beast. Okay, and here is a very provocative way to say it. Linguists talk about the neural basis of language with mutually understood awe. Okay, so it's a very common phrase, but it's something that is meant to be understood religiously. Okay, so that it's something incredibly profound and beyond our current comprehension. And but our parser poses the following question: is this, which means an empty lex and unlabeled areas, and this fiber system between them, and the ability to have action sets in assemblies in lex, is this the neural basis of language? I'm 99.9% it's not. Okay, but the point is that by doing this experiment, we were forced to have a hypothesis for it. Okay, enough. The study of the brain is fascinating, and it's by far the hardest thing that I've ever done. Okay, so I'll be frank with you. Assemblies and other operations may be what Axel is after. Okay, so and time will tell. How do assemblies learn and predict? And we have an active research project on that. So it will be very important to find out how learning and assembly calculus interface. How can one test, verify, falsify the assembly hypothesis for experiments? We have an NSF grant jointly with cognitive neuroscientists, and we are designing and will run after this pandemic experiments whose goal is to sort of catch some of the traces of the assembly calculus in the human brain. And I told you about the very exciting, I think, parser experiment, and how to engage us with questions that we have always felt were not worthy to even consider asking. Okay, so these are my collaborators. Santos Vempala, a theoretician at Georgia Tech. We embarked on the study of the brain together seven years ago. Wolfgang Maas is a computer scientist who turned neuroscientist the last 15 years and has been our teacher in many of these. Mike Collins, a great NLP researcher at Columbia and Google, and Dan Mitropolsky is a third-year graduate PhD student at Columbia who jointly advised by me and Mike. Okay, thank you.